And looks like yes, we are live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is going to be a very interesting little interview, and something that I've been trying to do more often for this channel is to interview more people in interesting political, situations. Such I've interviewed a YouTuber called Naked Ape, and oh crap, all right, sorry, stupid ads. I've interviewed him. A lot of people seem to like it. So I wanted to get someone who wasn't really on the writer side, but also someone who was what would you call, more of a classical liberal and such, but feels that his party has abandoned him. So let me introduce you to the Wizard of Cause. Say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Yes. By the way, don't mind the fan. It's just really hot. So, just hopefully I'm not going to trigger anyone. So
I can't hear anything.
Yeah, it's good, but someone's gonna complain. But it's really is a very I really wanted to get someone like you on for quite a while, because you probably is someone who, even though you have very 5,000 subscribers, I feel like you should get more, because you have a lot of intelligence, some really deep wealth information about what's going on with, like, for example, these groups going on that sprung up that recently. Stuff like, say, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, all these type of things. It just seems that, and with what's going on with Trump and all these type of Trump and Hillary, it seems like there's no one. Well, personally, I'm voting for Gary Johnson and that sort of thing. And it seems like for most people, they feel like there is no real party for someone like a guy like yourself,
Really, I mean, let's be honest, like, the parties that we have in this country are not for anyone except those in the parties. And of course, they're, financial benefactors and their ideological pack sets who generally either dictate the course of policy or themselves just cheerlead whatever sort of inane shit that the elected officials themselves come up with. So, I mean, there is no party for anyone. Anybody who thinks that, like, the Democrats, the Republicans give even the most remote semblance of a shit about them, they're delusional. We have perfect examples of this, and by way of these recent round of WikiLeaks dumps. I mean, the Democrats.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, the Democrats are, and it's nothing that's really surprising. Anybody who is, for instance, supporting Sanders at any time knew, obviously, especially with the debate coverages, that the media was firmly in the pocket of the establishment, and that it was really backing Hillary as much as it could. And really, I mean, there is the two main parties that we have now are for no one. And actually, before I jumped in here, though, I was in the midst of writing the next piece for the Rationalists, and in it, because at this point I rather see a Trump presidency as something of an inevitability.
Wow.
Clinton doesn't have, Clinton's supporters are mostly just people who can't stand Donald Trump, and then on the side of that, there's feminists who just want a vagina to sit behind the desk in the Oval Office. And then maybe handfuls of people who, in their lacking and sort of lapsed attention to what really went on, think back to the 90s under Bill Clinton and say, well, that was a pretty good time for me, so maybe we could do that again. Even though we all know now that, the financial prosperity that was enjoyed then was largely a result of bubble economies and the sort of deregulation that people like Robert Reich rail endlessly against. And so Hillary has divided the Democratic Party so thoroughly that progressives will either stay home or cast protest votes against her. Whereas Trump, there are more Republicans who don't like Trump but will vote for him to keep Hillary out of office, as well as Trump's own groundswell of support. So in that, I see what I'm describing in this article I'm writing now is basically a silver lining, because for one thing, between the two of them, Hillary Clinton is the more capable politician. If she's in any sort of office, she's the sort of person who knows how to really push agendas through. And a lot of people, I mean, Sargon's one, he likes to give Trump credit for being able to make deals. And in a business sense, that's probably the case, but it's a bit different when you're leveraging matters of policy and legislation. And so if Clinton was elected, she would have no problem ramming a good portion of her majority through, even against a hostile Congress. Whereas Trump, even if he was elected with a Republican supermajority, the Republican establishment itself is pretty furious at him still. And they will pull many of the same sort of like ugly tricks that and stalling techniques that Obama has experienced. Now, what I see happening beyond that, though, is perhaps another silver lining is that once Trump is in office, regardless of the party, I could see Congress actually deciding to take action on executive authority to sort of roll it back to the, to what it was maybe pre-Bush. And at the same time, between the two of them, Hillary Clinton has driven a stake through the center of the Democratic Party, which means that the odds of it cracking and breaking apart are very likely. And likewise, Trump has done the same thing with the GOP. So the bright side here could be that with the Trump presidency, we'll have 4 years of next to nothing getting done and a whole bunch of bluster, while the two parties who serve no one crumble.
And that's something is, it feels like that's going to happen in the next couple of years. And when that does happen, it will probably have this whole type of this is going to be a huge eruption in the parties. And I do see if Hillary does win this, which I think it's going to, but it's going to be closer than a lot of people say it is. I think if Hillary does, she's going to have a lot of backlash with the people she's burned over these past couple of this whole campaign, and she's going to have to really, And then you have Bernie Sanders, who completely just basically basically stab her the people who support him in the back. That's it.
Yeah, that's a lot of people get the impression of. I would go as far as saying that Sanders' move it was a terrible decision on his part, but really his move is because he's probably that scared of a Trump presidency.
Yeah, but honestly, it just even though I a lot of people might not like Ron Paul, but Ron Paul in his both times he ran, he did not support or endorse any of the Republican. He didn't endorse McCain or Mitt Romney.
No,
he stood his ground, and something I wish his son would do, because his son, while he did get a little farther than what his dad, with everything. Hold on a second. Sorry, but his dad, Rand Paul, he never got. He tried to do the sellout thing.
Well,
and he failed at it.
I'd say the thing to keep in mind with, especially when it comes to Ron Paul and the Libertarian, both the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian wing of the conservative right as it is that the Libertarians have been attempting to make an insurgency into the GOP for probably about 20 or 30 years. And they experienced a boost after Bush. I mean, in the 2008 election, for instance, I remember when I was working that one, the self-identified conservatives, self-identified conservatives who had really identified as libertarians were they were holding, they had a holding pattern. It had been roughly between, I want to say 8 and maybe 12%. Up until 2008 and during 2008. Now in 2010, that leapt up to roughly 12 to 14%, and then after 2010 and then after 2012, we were always hearing things about the GOP needs to do soul searching and the like. And I think Milo Yiannopoulos said it rather well when he pointed out that social conservatism is largely dead. The evangelical right has nowhere near the power it used to. It's not coming back, and as such, what it means to be a conservative in America these days seems to be more geared towards the sort of minimalist government opinions and a more libertarian sort of styling than it used to. Now, Ron Paul was at the head of that. What I think we're going to see going forward is I think we're going to see the ranks of the Libertarian Party and the showing for Gary Johnson really swell, because of perhaps some disenchanted Republicans, but more likely due to angry Sanders supporters. And the Libertarian Party itself has, to some extent, grown slightly more liberal. They seem less engaged in trying to dominate the GOP, and finally more interested in actually growing their own ranks, which is what split them down the middle for the longest time. It was always that, libertarians were forced to ask themselves, okay, do I support Ron Paul's Republican candidacy, or do I try and support the party itself? And, that just basically split the voter base in half. But now, with the GOP going Trump, I mean, granted, a number of libertarians are probably like getting in on the Trump train, as it was, but it's I think we're seeing the beginning of the end of the bipartisan politics. And Ron Paul, I don't really agree with him on very much. I agree with him on a fair number of topics, but I do have a good amount of respect for him because he does in fact stick to his guns. I think Rand's issue was firstly like he didn't go through the House, he just went straight to the Senate. And I think as a result of that, he found himself sort of welcomed into the Republican establishment a bit more thoroughly than Ron Paul was, than his dad. Because Ron Paul is not, he's not interested in making like deals with the establishment like that. He's, at least not to the extent Rand is. And I think Rand came into office with a bit more, I want to say, political tact than his father did.
Yeah, that's something I understand he's trying to moderate, and I understand some of the stuff I thought Rand would be a good idea. Heck, he did bring issue to light, for example, the way the drug war, and has really affected African Americans, and something that both Trump and Hillary has not even mentioned. In fact, Hillary is like, she's so like for saying, oh, we care for the Black community, but yes, the answer to most of these problems she doesn't really want to go into. She rather just say, oh, I just care a bit of hot sauce, or calling Black people super predators and such and so on.
Yeah, I mean, Clinton is, for one thing, so mired in like her status as being part of the political elite, and in her affluence and such, that what would she, outside of like what she may read in reports, what could she really know about poverty? I mean, what could she additionally too, she's a career politician, which means that she can have a conversation with somebody who is bearing their soul and really laying out the reality of the issues, and it'll be in one ear and out the other with a whole bunch of smiles and nods, just so that she can then turn around and do the bidding of her benefactors, which is the way it's worked throughout the system forever. And when it comes, it's one of these things too. I mean, with Black Lives Matter, I look at that movement and I see more of a tragedy than anything else, because they've got an opportunity to do things like hold Clinton's feet to the fire, but they're not doing such with any kind of concise or congealed message. Just, what was it, last week, or it's either last week or over the weekend, the Oakland police had a barbecue to open a dialogue, and the National Black Lives Matter said that this doesn't reflect our values. I'm sorry, if you're not interested in actually opening up a dialogue with the people that you're claiming are your adversaries, what is it exactly that you are about?
Yeah, and that was from DC. It was like right there, because I live around here. I was like, seriously, that just really, it does. And what's funny about this whole thing is, I look at old videos of, like, say, Malcolm X. I'm always going at, and he says something really interesting. He says the only way, this was back in the 60s, where things were 60s and 50s, where tension was
real bad. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he said the only way we can figure this out, he has the I'm paraphrasing, and some of his words and such like that. So if I offend anyone, who cares? By the way, I'm black, so who cares? He says if the Negro can sit across the table from the white man, and Negro can air his grievances free from reprisals or whatever. And he says vice versa for the white man. White man able to air his grievances.
Was this post Mecca?
And yeah, this was post, I believe. I think post Mecca, I believe.
Yeah.
I think something like that. And I think there's something he was right about that. Is that we still have not had that huge argument yet. I feel that that's the problem. Is that we never got that huge argument across the table. The community, white community and black community, that huge long argument. And then at the end of the day, we could just say, okay, we got all that stuff out of the way. Let's see if we can change these situations. Mm-hmm. And even worse, though, and there's actually an article from the Huffington Post, so be warned. He said, "quote, let's see, you have Maxwell Stratison, I don't care. Basically calling out Richard Sherman, Richard Sherman, for NFL football player. He talked about this issue of saying Richard Sherman really needs to stop saying all lives matter. I'm like, you should read the article if you want to really get yourself he was like, he said, I stand by what I said, that all lives matter. We're all human beings. That's what, Richard Sherman said. And now he's getting this huge against virtual, negative virtual signal type of thing. Just like this article saying, well, the thing is, Sherman, you're wrong. You're basically saying, this whole type of BS. And I'm like, this is the problem. It's trying to say, Black Lives Matter, which I struggle to support because I feel there is a lot of, yes, I'm saying feeling a lot, so it's a crutch, so I apologize. There's so much positive things they could. I mean, the Oakland chapter, they had a barbecue, they talked and actually had a dialogue, and you have Richard Sherman talking about these issues. Like, this is good, but yet it just seems as they're this purist type of thing, this purist type of, you know what I mean, right?
You're absolutely right. And it's when you take the radical wings, who are the ones we see, I'm not deluded enough or jaded enough to believe that the entirety of Black Lives Matter and those who support the movement are, pro cop killing, race baiting, screaming, hysterical. And I know this isn't the case, but the face that is presented by the movement, and this is because it is, even though they say there's paid protesters and Soros and all that, the reality is that money or no, it's an unprofessional activist movement. And as such, the message itself is so garbled. So you're from DC. Now, yes. The majority of work I did there was in places like Simple City, Anacostia. And it was an interesting experience too, because basically at that time, the job itself was the lead organizer would drive me to a place like MLK Boulevard, drop me off around noon, and then try and pick me up before dark. And I would just have to go door to door to door, every single door. And they had these old out of date lists that they always give you. And they do this on every campaign, no matter what it is. They give you a list of usually registered voters, and you're supposed to go to the address, and it's to help clean up the list. I just scrapped that and took a blank piece of paper and went and introduced myself to whoever answered the door. Now, naturally, because those areas are as marginalized and impoverished and violent as they are, people aren't really that keen to invite some strange white boy with a bright t-shirt into their house to talk with them about saving the world. But those who did were usually older people. And when they did, it was interesting because I abandoned the script, abandoned the organizing script because it was out of date and it didn't work anyway. And I used it as an opportunity to talk to them to find out more about what they knew would help rather than what the organization thought could help, or try and convince them to become dues-paying members and all that shit. Now, one thing I heard over and over and over again was that if they want, that if the neighborhoods in question were to improve, the things that they needed were police substations, and they needed a return to localized community patrols, ideally foot patrols, so that the officers who were policing the area knew the residents, and the residents knew the officers, and there wasn't that divide between the police to where they're acting like city guards who are just, sent in to keep the rabble at bay so the nobles can leave in peace. And that was one thing. Another one was actual community reinvestment, because at the time I think it was the waterfront was being, this was 2008, yeah, 2008, and the waterfront area, which has been heavily gentrified.
Mm-hmm.
That was done largely using what was called EZ and CR. It's Empowerment Zone and Community Renewal programs. And these were projects of housing and urban development. And the way they worked is that, that standard scheme of you offer tax incentives for economic investment and development within given communities. Unfortunately, because they were basically put together and passed into law as most bills do, with plenty of influence from the private sector, you ended up with effectively sort of a grab bag for developers, and that's what they do. They'd price out the residents of this area that used to be rather like a thriving sort of working class neighborhood and had fallen on exceptionally hard times due to a myriad of circumstances, including things like the drug war. And then they would offer them these homes, these cheaply constructed prefab style homes that were basically put like right outside of the shitty, nasty areas in places like Anacostia and Bradbury Heights and the like. And so it was amazing to me too. I'd be going through what was effectively like row house or project housing in Anacostia, right? And I'd go 2 blocks and then I'd see these hideous prefabricated, cheaply made, like 3-bedroom homes. And the people there, I mean, I'd go through the first neighborhood, everyone's unemployed. All right, they're unemployed, or they're underemployed, or they're, their job is just some like low level like shit. And then I'd go to the next place and I'd find professionals who were working for NASA, like DC professionals who were working in the government in the public sphere, but they'd been basically displaced into these already dense and high crime areas. And so these, the residents of these neighborhoods, especially the older ones, knew very well what the mechanisms of their area's marginalization was. And for all of the tremendous information and learning that I gained through that, to see now, 8 years later, the movement which ought to be at the forefront of actually calling upon, the government to reform matters with those issues in mind and those solutions in mind, to see the movement which by all rights ought to be the one saying this, failing to do so as it's dominated by shrieking millennials who just want to raise a fist and thump their chest and feel righteous about themselves. It's a fucking tragedy.
Yes, I mean there is a lot of wrong in the Black Lives Matter movement. I take no pleasure in it and saying that, because there is a lot. I think there's so many issues of police brutality is one of the main ones, and this is, I mean, it is documented of many of overuse of police using force, over excessive force, and getting away with it. And for example, say Kelly Thomas, or we're saying Eric Gardner, or you see all these others, these horrible and terrible situations. Sandra Bland. I mean, to me, I'm like that. I think should not even have happened. Why was she even being called, or even being, have the police being there anyway? She wasn't even doing anything wrong, and they're having her getting killed, killing herself, and that to me to me there's a lot of noise and a lot of it just seems it just there's nothing there. It's like, oh, there's so much horrible things and terrible things that the police has done to Black people, but also other Americans. But it seems like Black Lives Matter chooses, you know, they pick the wrong. I mean, I'm not saying these people who don't deserve to be dead. Like, for example, Freddie Gray. You have murals painted for him. I'm like, you do realize this man was a dope dealer and all these type of things. Yes, he didn't deserve to die, but it looks like his whole the whole situation. It's like he might have done the damage himself, trying to get out, trying to get out of the police rag. Even the people in evidence, so the evidence shown this, and just recently, it was today that the cops were exonerated and such. And now I worry because when you hear that, are they going to have riots again? Are they going to destroy parts of the community again?
Well, probably. I mean, that's it's Baltimore, so it's kind of inevitable no matter what you do. But this is, it all comes back to this thing, though. I mean, the only actual college degree I have is in criminal justice, and so I studied police sciences, and I specialized. I had a stronger interest in investigation, but if one looks at the evolution of policing as a I guess a trade, to use the term lightly, it's come a long way. Now, when I make that comparison to the classic city guards, right, that most of us are familiar with through video games, that was at one point the main purpose of law enforcement was to keep the rabble at bay, so the gentry could live peacefully and comfortably. Now, with that, I mean, that evolved then when the Pinkertons got involved here in the States. The Pinkertons, that was private policing, really. It was effectively mercenary policing. And the Pinkertons actually are still, for those who are familiar, they're actually still in business. Pinkerton Security is owned by Securitas, who is one of the largest, I think it's the second largest security firm. I worked for them back in the day. But with the Pinkertons, what you ended up getting was a lot of Civil War veterans, typically, coming in, and they were the first to really offer police forces that sort of military regimentation, right? And a standardization of behavior and conduct. And along with that, once actual municipal and state-run police forces began adopting the Pinkerton models, a large portion of what went into it was actually like enforcing the law. It wasn't about, quelling unrest and that sort of thing. It was about straight ahead enforcing the law as the law is. Now, we've drifted further away from that because a lot of what that entailed as it continued to evolve as a trade and a science in a sense, was that it gravitated more towards the militaristic side of things. So use of force, the classic training method was called escalation of force. So if you have a suspect who's not cooperating and is violent and they have their fists, well, then you have your baton or you have your taser. And if they are armed with a weapon such as a knife, that's when your firearm comes into play. But these days, it's it's suns out, guns out sort of thing. And I think the Baton Rouge shooting was a perfect example of the failures of, I'd say, police training at this point. Because to watch that video, what you had was two officers rolling up on a suspect that they knew, or at least suspected by reports, to be armed, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were right up on him and they were wrestling him. They were right up on him and they were wrestling him to the ground right away. It was about get in there, get forceful, all of this. The correct procedure for that, I mean, would have, like, the standards and this is the way police do it. Most good police do it. And I lived in Louisiana, though, so I do know that police in Louisiana are not the most professional. But they should have had their weapons trained on him from two separate angles, right? And they should have been ordering him at a gunpoint to basically, get down on his knees, get down on your stomach, hands behind your head, lace your fingers together. One officer would have kept his weapon trained on him while the other moved in to cuff, disarm, and investigate. But instead, it just broke into a wrestling match and then gunfire. And this is the thing, is that it's, when it comes back to Black Lives Matter, we don't hear calls for, better police training. We don't hear calls um, for changing the way that police are trained to deal with suspects, especially in high crime areas. What we hear is fuck the police, dead pigs, we need dead cops, all this shit. There's no constructive dialogue going on now. I, for a while, thought, well, maybe that's just the fringe activists getting all the attention. But then when the national official Black Lives Matter organization turned down and refuted and rebutted the barbecue concept in Oakland, and if there's one place on earth that the black community and the police need to have a dialogue, it's Oakland. That's probably one of the few places I can think that's probably worse than DC.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
That's, to me, I thought that was a beautiful thing. In fact, there was more videos of like saying, Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. There was like the two type of, I think it was down in Texas right after the horrible shootings with the, cops that happened. And they really, they came together, and it was a very beautiful thing. They joined the protesters together. And it's a sad and terrible thing that it takes these violent acts to bring us together. But that's, to me, is a very positive thing, trying to bring people together. But now when you have the official thing saying, "Oh, that's not the right thing to do," what else is there? What is there? Is it violence? Is it killing cop? What is your solution to these issues? And when I look at the Black Lives Matter homepage and the whole broken windows policing, which doesn't make any sense, I can agree in saying, in some issues and such, like, for example, you shouldn't have, someone, just possessing weed or something like that. If they're just doing that, you shouldn't just go and beat them to death or something like that. But if you're saying, okay, disturbing the peace or trespassing, saying that the police shouldn't be involved in that, that doesn't make any sense. You're saying because if the police don't get involved in those situations and things get, like I said, escalation, and they're going to be right there crying like, where are the cops? Where are the cops? And, it's going to be a dog chasing its tail. We're going to be going to the same dance over and over again.
Exactly. And it's, I was involved in Occupy quite a bit, and really not so much as, one of the rank and file, more as coming out of the professional world, spending many years, as a professional organizer and campaigner, learning the science and the art of organizing, and really, for lack of a better term, mass manipulation. Which is, it's one of those unfortunate, necessary realities and evils that we face. The science of, and this is for those who don't know, it's primarily comes from Lippmann, Creel, and mostly Bernays. Now, are you familiar with these three?
Not really.
Okay, well, a quick history lesson. What we understand throughout really the world, what we understand is propaganda. The manipulative communications by governments and such, even in marketing and advertising. These are all the brainchilds primarily of a man named Edwin Bernays. Bernays was, he was brought on by the Wilson administration to, along with George Creel, who's known as the godfather of yellow journalism. And these two, with some help from Lippmann, basically worked to create the first propaganda system, the first real, studied and carefully measured propaganda system. And it was for, it was in the aims of pushing American public support towards involvement in World War I. At the time, prior to this, there were, American opinions about foreign intervention and war and the like were staunchly against. That America was a nation of people who wanted nothing to do with the wars of the old world, which had been raging forever. And it was through the manipulations of press and media and careful crafted messaging that the Wilson administration was able to drum up support for the war, and at the same time actually crack down on things such as socialist parties, which were evolving. I think it was in Minnesota. I believe Minneapolis. I may be wrong, but I believe it was Minneapolis actually had a socialist mayor. And there was a burgeoning socialist party within the U.S., but that was all cracked down upon in conjunction with this propaganda campaign. Now, Goebbels himself credits Bernays as being sort of the role model from whom he took his lessons about how to be propaganda minister. But all this aside, this, there is a science and there's an art to this kind of campaigning, and it is just a reality that we can't get around because it exists. That being the case, when I was involved with Occupy, I sort of found myself feeling a bit like Jane Goodall studying primitive wildlife. I wanted to see how the amateurs and the homespun armchair revolutionary types were doing with it. And to a certain extent, I was impressed. The sort of internal democracy that Occupy enjoyed with the things like the General Assemblies. And there were factions, especially in Boston. The factions that existed and the ways in which they operated was impressive. For instance, there was like there were two factions of anarchists that I came to call the Black Flag and the Red Flag. Now, the Red Flag were the sort of communist anarchist types, and the Black Flag were just the standard sort of gutter punk anarchist types. And I remember one time in a GA, the Black Flag had they proposed a motion, and it went before the General Assembly. And there was all kinds of bluster ahead of time, where they were saying that if it didn't pass, that they would leave the camp. And at the time, they were actually sort of the backbone of much of the logistical day-to-day operations. They were the ones managing the pantry. They were the ones doing the dishes. They were the ones maintaining tents and roads and such, which is kind of funny because when you consider the inner public services of an occupied encampment being run by the anti-statist anarchist types, it's sort of ironic. But back to the point. When I was observing that, what I also did notice was external influences coming in, both by way of what we now call social justice warriors, as well as institutional organizations like SEIU, who were my former employers at the time. And with SEIU, for instance, they were constantly trying to dump money and supplies in order to sort of hijack the thing. They'd send organizers down with a whole bunch of organized activists that they'd pull out of nowhere. They'd flood General Assemblies, and they'd try and force votes on, the SEIU agenda. So, for instance, in Chicago, I had a friend who was still an operative for working with SEIU at the time, and he became disgusted because we all signed up to organize workers into unions, and instead he was being diverted and sent down to the Occupy camps with coats and tents and money, for the purposes of sort of trying to bribe them into supporting Rahm Emanuel, because he was Obama's boy and SEIU is Obama's bitch. And they fortunately took the money and the supplies, and then they voted down SEIU and said, "Thank you for your support. Now fuck right off." But I think what we're seeing with Black Lives Matter is a similar thing. I think a bunch of coffee shop revolutionary types with no real visions for the future, no real understanding of the nuances and specifics of the issues that are facing the communities they claim to support, are just really showing up so that they can have their sort of William Wallace moment, right? So they can feel as though they're just some bold revolutionary fighting the power, et cetera, without actually saying much outside of that they hate cops, and oftentimes they hate white people, and that the blacks are just universally oppressed in every conceivable way before they return to what I'm guessing is probably their college dorms or their lovely loft houses somewhere. Now,
So I'm sorry. It's basically like this Shakespeare once said. It was I don't know which one. Was it Macbeth or one of those plays? He said this line: "This is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing." That's pretty much most of what happened to Occupy and
was that?
throughout. Because of this, must be something.
Oh, I love that quote. I just don't know. It's gonna bother me for the rest of my life until I figure out what it was. But no, you're absolutely right, and that's really the problem. I think that's like that. I think that's what's plaguing modern activism. I think another part of it too, though, is that you know, in the past, the leaders of movements rose to be the leaders by virtue of the respect that they earned. Right, Martin Luther King was a leader in the civil rights movement because his message and his ability to deliver the message and the work that he put in and the fact that he lived for what he did was what earned him the position as a figurehead. But these days, I notice, I mean, and you get it on all sides. I mean, we don't, if we're going to look at the conservative side of things, we no longer have the Buckleys, right? We don't have that kind of intellect. Instead, what we have is Milo Yiannopoulos, who is a troll. I mean, he's just all he does is troll. He wants to be Oscar Wilde, and he's trolling, and he's brilliant at it. And I'm not going to even say that he's not intelligent and that he doesn't form up good arguments, but it's not his ideas and arguments which really resonate with people. It's just the trolling. And on the opposite side, we have, for Black Lives Matter, we have what? DeRay, Sean King. I mean, how are DeRay or Sean King in any way comparable to any of the civil rights leaders of old? I mean,
No, I mean, then again, I'm more of when I look at the modern day leaders, there are a couple named State. Oh, by the way, that was Macbeth. By the way, so I was right. Yeah, over people to chat. Blenders off. Thanks for that. And the full quote: "Life's but a walking shadow, a porous player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot."
I feel bad because I actually realized I haven't even taken a look at the chat and I'm looking at a bunch of people trying to talk to me. I'm sorry, everyone.
It's okay. It is, I always, when you have a good conversation, and hopefully we are having one, we get lost into it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm honestly kind of surprised that you yourself don't have more subscribers. Jump into some streams, maybe like maybe Edgy or Kraut would bring you on or something. I don't know.
Yeah, but again, I just recently got 1,000 subscribers just being because of videos from Tyler Preston 20, saying how blacks feel about social justice warriors. Both of the videos and helped me immensely about that. So,
it may sound, I mean, it'll sound to many like tokenism when I say this, but fuck you if you misinterpret it that way. But I think that this because what we're seeing is sort of the dawn of a new sort of, and I don't want to over romanticize it by saying it's a new enlightenment, but those who hold to enlightenment principles, those who hold to notions of empiricism and rationalism, and they are free speech advocates, and they're opposed really to just ideological mania like we have. Especially in the face of such race baiting as we see from the social justice warrior set and the Black Lives Matter and such. I can't help but think that more black rational voices should be heard. I mean, when I see things, I am no supporter of Trump, and I honestly think that a lot of his support base is genuinely sort of backwards and just enthusiastic, but that's just the nature of things. But when I see things like black Trump supporters catching the genuinely racist sort of shit that comes from black progressives, it's just it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean, there was a 16-year-old black kid who he supported Trump in a video or something, and then next, the people, mostly black, like liberal, I don't know what they call them, they were hounding him, doxing him. Heck, they took a photo of him working, and they're like, "Go harass him," and send this. I'm like, seriously? He's 16 years old. He's a kid. I know politics is a very messy business, but seems like, and it probably just some stuff that happened, back, this is, it's all documented, but it's just like, it's still, what's the good word for it? Like, just still icky,
Mhm.
And it's just like, how can you do that to like some young kid who's not even able to vote? He's 16, but he has an opinion, and if you are, you can't dissuade him from his facts or anything else. The best you do is threaten death on him, or harass him to a point that force him to have like push him into this this negative part. I don't understand that. No, I don't understand how that works. How's that? What was that? Was a victory? You push him to like say he kills himself? Yeah, that's a victory. I'm like, how? Ugh.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, is like everyone is becoming so supercharged in their certainty of things. It's really, I was talking about this last night in the what's the logic only zone. I can't even remember. It was the first time I jumped into that stream, but the parallels between political and especially identity political enthusiasm and religious fundamentalism are quite often just so glaring they're hard to look past. It's and it seems to really all be rooted in this certainty in a singular set system of ideas and values, and it's like, oh, it's something you buy off the shelf. You can't order a customized version of it. You just pick it off the shelf, pull it out of its packaging, and that's just what you've got. And people seem it's like a convenience thing, really. It seems like a matter of laziness and convenience. The people adopt these ideas, and they become so hypercharged in that they have no compunctions about anything from ruining people's lives or harassing and just treating people badly based on a difference of opinion, up through violence. And violence seems to be largely sort of the last sort of the last step in that chain, but it always still happens.
Yeah, I. By the way, the person I follow mostly, and like black leaders is Cornell West, who I think
Oh
is
God,
really
yeah, I love that guy. I
me too.
mean, I think I mean, like I'll hear some of the shit he says, and I'll be like, I don't know about that. But like Cornel West is the kind of guy who, if you have a disagreement with him, he's probably more interested in talking with you than anybody who's on his side.
Yeah, and I wish there was more like that. And it's a shame because when you have, yeah,
Yeah, I love too the fact like he calls everyone brother and sister, everyone. And it's like that's the kind of attitude,
that's what I want to adopt more. I was like, man, he calls the white guy brother and sister, all the like, I'm like, white guy, black guy, whatever. I'm like that type of camaraderie, and I really want to have that type of stuff. Really want to improve, to really to have that break in the barriers.
you know
And
the
I'm like, if there was more people like him, I don't see any young guy like him.
well, I
It's
mean,
just someone who says, what's up, brother, to a white dude or a black dude or something like that. Hell, he called Trump brother. I'm like, what? It's like he doesn't. He says he's trying. He's like he's a little misformed, a lot misformed, but he still calls like he sees everyone as his family. That's a
yeah.
beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, the Trumpkins out there will probably hate me for saying this, and most conservatives will probably say, "What, are you fucking crazy?" But I've found also, I mean, this is a guy I tend to disagree with even more than most, but he's very progressive. But Van Jones,
Yeah, I see
Van
some.
Jones, yeah, Van Jones isn't afraid to actually just have a friendly conversation with somebody he disagrees with. I
Yeah.
mean, and you see the shit I put up on Twitter. He's still following me.
And that is insane.
Yeah.
And also, another one, I really think, and he just did a good speech on the DNC. I think like 2 nights ago or something. I think Cory Booker. I think he can actually be someone really good in the party because I think he.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like anybody who stands up and talks about what a great president Hillary Clinton will be.
It's the party thing.
I know.
I think
No,
President Obama had to say the stuff about Kerry back in 2004. So
yeah, and it's a similar thing when you consider too the fact that I mean, Cory Booker, he's a rising star within the Democratic Party, and if you get invited to give an address before the fucking convention, yeah, you're gonna toe the line.
yeah, I mean, unless you're Ted Cruz, which
Well, yeah, I mean, well, honestly, like I mean, I think Ted Cruz is so full of shit in 90% of what he says, but I did honestly get some respect for him on that one.
yeah,
Although I like the comment that I saw because he's like, vote your conscience, and I forget who made the comment. It might have been Bill Maher, but he said like, well, the fact that Trump is your nominee means that ship has sailed.
yeah. But again, it's hopefully guy, so like I said, Gary Johnson. I just want him in debates. That's what I would love to see if he gets into the debates. His polls are rising, so if he gets in debates, maybe something interesting might happen.
Well, I found something that's interesting within racial politics and partisan politics with the overlap between them. Now, prior to everything going to hell, because it's funny, we can look back to the 60s and 70s, and that's when race relations themselves were very bad. Like the firebombing in Philly, the riots, all of that,
4 little girls down in I think it was Birmingham, and
the church bombings and the lynchings and the whole Dixiecrat thing. But what it's race relations, they've cooled off, but it's not so much because things got better as much as people just stopped interacting with each other. And the drug war had, I mean, in my opinion, the drug war played the biggest role of anything in terms of really segregating and marginalizing black communities, especially in urban areas. But if you go back to before, and another thing that was also is no fault divorces and single parent homes. But if you go back to like the traditional black family, in terms of values, it could be said that, I mean, outside of the issues surrounding civil rights, much of like Black America is rather conservative, or has been at least. I mean, the community acceptance of homosexuality, for instance, it took a long time to really get anywhere.
Yeah, and there's a lot of conservative Christian, but yeah, it seems like
it's traditional.
Traditional stuff, and their vote, high. I think the reason why is the Republican Party. I don't know. It just seems like they didn't really try, or they tried, but I think the Democrats. I think it was that shift of the Southern strategy they used to call it.
There was that, and also Reagan's moral majority didn't help.
Yeah, and I think Barry Goldwater said this, saying that this will destroy your party, and he was right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was 100% right, and I honestly wonder if because Hillary Clinton was pretty much a Goldwater girl. She grew up idolizing Bertie Goldwater. I wonder if Bertie Goldwater did win and he stepped the tide of the religious right or the moral majority. Do you think she will be running as a Republican instead of the Democratic Party? I think
Let's be honest, Hillary Clinton is a Republican.
Yeah, she is, but
she wears the D in a lot of blue pantsuits. But when at the end of the day, Hillary Clinton basically embodies the dream of Reaganism.
Yeah, it is, and also when you look at the parties and such, and the really sad parts of what's going on, and you can't really discount another thing that's happened. There was the whole radical Islam type of the craziness going on there, and there was another. I think there was a attack on a priest. I think it was a couple weeks ago.
No, it was this week.
It was this week.
You're talking the Islamists in Normandy, right?
Oh yeah. They just hacked off a priest's head, and the week before there was all this other situation. He had the bomb, in I think it was in Germany as well. Then you have it just keeps going, and then when you don't talk about it, it's just if you say it, it's like he had that whole, Ben Affleck saying it's gross, it's racist. That huge fire up back with Sam Harris, like it was like last year or 2 years ago.
No, that was earlier this year, I believe.
No, it was 2015, I believe.
Oh, it
It
was?
was,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I know the one you're talking about. See, the problem, I think the other problem too, it comes back to polarization. The Democrats have decided to take the line of, and I shot I recorded a video, but I didn't actually publish it because I realized it was less it was less sound and empirical than it was just a reaction, and I don't like doing those. I don't like, I'll do off the cuff opinions and rants, but I don't like I don't like slinging out visceral reactions on my channel, because anybody with any intellectual honesty, if they do that, they will, to a certain extent and for a certain amount of for a certain proportion of what they do is turn around and look at it and say, well, I was overreacting, or perhaps that wasn't nuanced enough. And I'm also I'm a self-analytic and oftentimes self-loathing person, so it happens. But what we have, Prince Charles tweeted out after the Nice attack, terrorism has no religion. And now I've been saying for quite a fucking while now that I'm pretty sure that the majority of terrorist attacks that are going on throughout Europe, and the attack in Orlando and that in San Bernardino, those people were pretty damn religious, wouldn't you say?
Yes. And even worse, it's like in San Bernardino, you had neighbors they didn't say anything because they were afraid to be called racist, the label. Yeah. And they are just the scarlet letter. It's
the political correctness is obscene. I mean, even in my daughter's own school, actually, my daughter, unfortunately, like she lives with her mother, and the only place in town in the city that they live in, they live in a school district, the school is the worst in the state. Now, Manchester itself, Manchester, New Hampshire, for a long time was a federally designated refugee hub. They got because New Hampshire has no sales tax, no income tax. It's got an exceptionally low tax burden for individuals. But because of that, it's desperate for any federal money it can get its hands on. And so it was part of this refugee placement program where the state got federal money to place refugees in the city. And for the most part, when I lived there especially, for the most part, the refugees were some of the friendliest fucking people you'd find. I mean, you get a Somali and you cut him off in traffic, he smiles and waves because he's still happy no one's trying to wear his genitals for jewelry. But part of the issue, though, is that as the immigration and the influx of refugees continued, especially once generations sort of passed off the torch and the young generation started having their own kids and so on, is that like 40% of my daughter's class is ESL. And as much as a fucking right, and I'm all for refugee and immigrant children getting like the best possible education and learning the English that they need to get by in this country. What that does is that puts a burden on the school system to where English speakers like my daughter are effectively, put aside, because the more resources and attention needs to be paid to these children who need basically remedial English lessons along with everything else. And this is in a school district that is grossly underfunded on its own and falling apart anyway. Now, while she's been going to school there over the last year, she was telling, she'd tell me routinely about being bullied by either some Arabic children, and often, usually more by Hispanic children, who do shit like call her stupid white girl. And, she was on the receiving end of what was effectively juvenile racism. Now, I'm going to partially blame the kids' parents because they're, probably doing what most parents of this age do, which is just let the television and such raise them. But the school itself was afraid to take action on these things because they didn't want to appear racist. And so I've had to teach my daughter, I'd like her to be growing up in a place where I can teach her that, go to authority, tell the teacher, tell the school what's happening when you're being bullied or if somebody's hitting you. But I'm forced to tell her things, because she came to me and told me about this, told me about being bullied because she's white. And then the kids were like slapping her. And I said, well, and what did you do next? What did you do after that? And she said, I went to the teacher and I said, what did the teacher do? She says, the teacher didn't do anything. And I'm like, well, this is unfortunately the sad lesson you're going to have to learn, is that the situations you're presented with, basically I was telling her, if somebody hits you, you have to hit them back and you have to hit them harder. And anytime anyone hits you, you always have to be the last person who hits. You never be the first person, but you always be the last one. And I had to teach my daughter, I had to basically teach my daughter, punch a kid in the face if he slaps you. And, children shouldn't have to learn that. I mean, children learn that anyway. We all learn that anyway. But it's the state of affairs now, where this political correctness has gone so far that we're, it's from top to bottom. Because if we look to the Democrats and we look to the political left, they're trying to say terrorism has no religion. Well, no, that's not true. I mean, even we can actually examine terrorism over the last 15 or 20 years, and we can see a defined shift. I mean, in the days of 9/11, right, and following 9/11, we had Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden coming out and saying, yes, of course they had the lines of, this is inshallah, inshallah, this is in the name of God, Allahu Akbar, all that. But that was couched with a long series of political grievances, many of which are not entirely baseless. Things such as, American involvement in Operation Ajax with Iran, American involvement in Algeria, Chad, Libya, Russian involvement in, the Russians' handling of Chechnya, the way things went down in the Philippines. It's not justifications for what went on, but these were geopolitical events. But what we see now, though, is we see Islamic State and those who are inspired by Islamic State. And there are next to no real political motivations being espoused. It's all about, this is in the name of the one God, Allah, and his prophet Muhammad. And by his grace, we will defeat the great Satan. And while this religious component is central to terrorism, and while it does, in fact, make the reactionary right, for instance, basically cast blame on all of Islam, which I'm not entirely absent from that myself, because Islam, it's
the motherhood of bad ideas.
Yeah, exactly. It's the motherload of bad ideas. It's an antiquated, barbaric mythology, which its own holy book is just filled with commandments, which, beyond just being of the same barbarism that typical Abrahamic religions espouse, it prefaces it by saying that this is the final and unalterable word of God. So that being the case, it's this willful ignorance on the part of the political left to actually address the issue of Islam as a core component of this problem. And then that only feeds the reactionary right, saying not only is Islam the problem, Muslims as a whole are a problem. And we get nowhere. We get absolutely nowhere except more terrorist attacks and bickering and hatred back and forth.
Yeah, and then it just seems that there's the culture as well. You see, people are afraid. They're afraid of the labels so much that even when the truth is staring at the face, they don't want to acknowledge it. It gives rise to the racist elements. I looked at a video of Crowton T. You do some live streams with him in some cases, and he actually had a video called "Secular Humanism." I think it was talking about these issues, saying the rise of the right, the extreme right, is growing in places like Germany and places in Europe slowly, because no one is actually the people who are supposed to be the smart and the intellectuals, the secular movements and such are not speaking. They're not saying anything because they are so afraid of the label. And once that, and then, because the end result, if no one talks about it, the people are going to go and, this is how these, groups get power. These right wing gets power because, hey, the rational people are not going to say anything. We will help you. We will save your family. We will save your stuff like that. So
absolutely. And it's funny too, even within, I've noticed within circles of people who like to pose themselves as, rational thinkers, objective-minded people who oppose radical, ideologies, specifically in regards to feminism. And well, you know what? Fuck not naming names. No, Dean Esme, for instance. I mean, it's funny because the same way in which he attacks feminism for being this motherload of bad ideas on its own, he defends Islam as a faith back and forth and up and down simply because it's an Abrahamic faith and he is himself a very devout Christian. And so it's this, it's everyone out there seems to be sort of doing a whole bunch of horse trading in respect to what they deem to be honest criticisms of ideologies, movements, and ways of thinking. Really, oftentimes largely dependent on where their own established ideological framework lies. So you have the radical, you have the alt-right rising in power, and this was in conversations with Sargon and others. I said, I remember a while back saying that, it's very rare that my predictions are wrong in terms of like political movements, because I predicted the factionalization and fracturing within the GOP, as well as that within the DNC and the liberal left. But I was really hopeful that basically the backswing to social justice was going to be a more radical sort of anarcho-capitalist individualism, like the hardest of hardline anarchistic libertarianism. And unfortunately, what we see is instead the backswing is in fact the alt-right. It's a largely racist movement, filled with a bunch of people who try and cite very oftentimes obscure researchers who say, oh, well, clearly there's a genetic component to the black community's intellectual inferiority, and you want to completely ignore generations of genuine marginalization, defunding of schools, drug wars, and that sort of thing. Oh yeah, we'll just dismiss all that and say it's a racial component. And they're gaining steam. And they're gaining steam because to those who are open to walking into that sort of way of thinking, it just makes perfect sense, and they don't need anything else. And they supercharge their opposition, and then their opposition in turn supercharges them.
Yeah, and it's the one thing I'm always when you have to do on it's a nice little thing. I was raised doing to others, try to be doing to others as you do. People will treat you as that sort of thing, and it's I feel like we've forgotten that. Like we treat each other in these extremes. We treat each other in this very this negative outlook and with each other, and I try to mitigate that sometimes with my little silly videos and such. But it does seem that people are trying to get into these extremes. One is you see what's happening in the alt-right, you see the left. That's the reason why I see one main reason why Trump is getting so much power is because no one in the left. Same thing with Germany and all these. I guarantee the reason why Brexit has gotten and such is that no one wants to address the big issues, like say for example, immigration, radical Islam. No one took the steps and say, okay, these are issues. You need to look into the communities and say, yeah, the United States and the West has caused it to destabilize many countries, but it is not an excuse to go and kill. Go up and blow up innocent people. And it's not an excuse to kidnap young girls and force them to become your wives and such. It is not an excuse to toss gay people out of buildings or hang them. It is not an excuse to burn women, young girls alive if you can't sell them as sex slaves, or shoot them up, or shoot them in the head just for trying to get some education into their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Just
no. I mean, that's the thing. It's the notions on the left that Islam is just a good boy and didn't do nothing, right? We have to be honest with ourselves. I mean, short of a reform movement that actually can bring Islam as a faith and the Islamic world in general out of what is effectively just the Stone Age with AKs, we're going to continue facing this. And really, if it can't move forward, and there are loads of exceptionally civilized Muslims, people who live as normal civilized people in advanced countries, and who just hold this silly belief that once upon a time a man rode to heaven on a winged horse. I mean, You know what? I can tolerate your silly mythologies. I can do that. But when your silly mythology is inspiring atrocity, then it comes to a point where at a certain level you have to ask, does this mythology and what it inspires, does it have a place in the modern world? And the more I see of things such as ISIS and the attacks that it inspires, and the fact that radicalizing is just such an easy thing to do now, especially thanks to basically a holy text which has it all built in there, and it says right pretty much at the beginning that there is no interpreting this in any other way. It is the literal and unalterable word of God. Well, then we do in fact have a problem, and no amount of hand wringing or hand waving or pretending that or just pretending that it's something other than what it is going to help it.
Yeah, and yeah. Also, we gotta give a shout out to I think you follow him Habib Focus Break on Twitter
God, yeah, I
who
love Habib.
he tries to do links to reform movements and such, which he needs some love too, because that dude, he goes in, he's like every day he just seems like it's like every time you see and read these articles with Muslim he goes and looks for the people who want the reformers. It's He goes out. He's not getting paid by anything. He's like where the reforms.
He's
He's
putting himself
risking.
at risk.
He's risking his life.
And then he and crazier still, he's crazier still. Like when I talk to him and say these same things to him, he comes back. He's like, "Oh no, dude, I'm in Dubai. I'm fine. No, the people that you really need to respect are the people that I'm going to be talking to soon, and these are people in Saudi Arabia who are ex-Muslim atheists, and they're like, no, I'll use my real name. I'll put my face up. I don't give a shit. I'm done hiding. They will kill you. It's like you want to." Those are it's funny too because just as like the Reason rally, that abysmal fucking like
Yes.
progressive circle jerk. While they're trying to stand up and pretend that they're secularists and that they're opposed to theocracy and all of this, it's just like feminists ignoring the plight of Muslim women. It's honestly, the atheist community, I think there's one place on earth, and I've noticed that genuine skeptics and genuine atheists, those who aren't just identifying as such because they think Christianity is oppressive, but those who genuinely oppose theocracy and those who oppose the idea of like we should live according to silly Bronze Age myths, the attention to places like Saudi Arabia, where you can be killed for questioning this Bronze Age fairy tale. I mean, you know what? I don't give a shit how many congressmen stand up and say that this is God's favorite country and this is a country Christian nation. I could not give a shit when friends of mine like Habib and friends of his are literally in mortal danger simply for expressing their opinions.
I just can't not live. I don't know how that would happen. People say, "Oh, this," even though I will say, as a Christian, I will say my faith has done some really, the people who followed it done some really crappy things. But when I see what's going on in, those in, Saudi Arabia, our ally, by the way, I just had to just stress that out because some people were like, "That's horrible, how terrible," but yeah, they are our ally.
Mm-hmm.
They flog people who say a priest doesn't like you, flog them, or you toss gay. I'm like, is this someone? And not only that, 20% of Hillary's campaign came from Saudi Arabia too.
Mm-hmm.
You just
it's funny too because I mean
she's supposed to be a feminist. Like
God, today the simple backwards fucking hypocrisy that I saw from those in the Hillary camp was just insane because everyone's like, oh, well, these emails are dangerous because Russian hackers found them. It's like, have you given a moment's thought to what they say? Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. No, it's just like Russia. It's like when I'm sorry. So wait, the Liberal Democratic Party is now playing up the Red Scare angle, right?
Oh,
Meanwhile, this feminist and this leftist who is supposed to be leading the party, to which most you would think on a typical partisan level, atheists would gravitate towards, is taking campaign cash and almost undoubtedly trading it for favors with the most brutal theocratic regime on earth.
yeah.
Really?
And it's just it's like you look at this. I'm like, this has to be some type of weird joke, like some type of real prank, like because you can't write this stuff up. This makes absolutely no sense logically. That how can you support? I'm like, I understand that some cultures and stuff like that, you got to make deals and things like that, but this is supposed to be an icon, a strong woman who cares about women around the world. She doesn't like oppression, all this type of stuff. And that you have these deals with a country that if she was there right now, she would probably be killed or or
Well,
worse.
if she lived there and was herself, well, I mean, it's if she said anything that she says in public otherwise, yeah,
Yeah,
it's I mean, it baffles, it's baffling. It just defies even the worst imagination, really.
yeah,
And
and
this is what we're faced with too. And then the sad thing is too is like, what is the alternative in terms of mainstream American politics? Who is the voice that's speaking out against radical Islam? Fucking Donald Trump? Seriously,
yeah.
seriously, the bloviating buffoon who made the Floby famous without knowing it is the what leading voice in the political sphere?
Yes, a WWE Hall of Famer.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Yes.
Can you imagine what Christopher Hitchens would say if he saw the world that is the way it is today?
I think he would die twice.
Yeah, he'd probably pick up smoking again,
He's just like
and he'd
that.
switch to clothes, and he'd be like, "All right, I figure if I can go 2.5 months chain smoking these things, I won't have to deal with any of this anymore."
Oh goodness, he's like, well, they're gonna send him out. He's like, because he probably would lose his mind. He'd probably be in the insane asylum at this point if he actually saw what happened. He'd be in the insane asylum. Because she's always, if not because of the feminists, would probably just shut him down anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean, we see what happens with Dawkins, and we see what happens with Harris.
Yeah.
And I mean, and this has been this is another sort of sad thing. Getting back to that point of like where are the thought leaders coming from? The fact that so much of them are coming out of like YouTube, and as a YouTuber myself, I mean, I really don't regard. I mean, granted, I like to think I'm smarter than the average bear in many respects, but my YouTube channel, it's a shit talking channel.
Yeah.
It's slightly more sophisticated than some others and less sophisticated than yet still others, but it is, I mean, YouTube itself and YouTube channels largely are just shit talking. That's really all we're doing. And to see a suggestion that the replacement for the original four horsemen of Hitchens, Dennett, Dawkins, and Harris being including, and I say this appreciating and enjoying his channel, and I don't want to come across as though I'm like just shit talking him outright, but I mean, amazing atheist, right? His is not in a hub or a hive of deep and stimulating intellectual discourse.
He makes entertaining videos, but sometimes
he's an entertainer, and he understands that. He knows. I mean, I doubt TJ would, in any capacity, try and pass himself off as some kind of great mind. He's like the new Descartes or something. No, he recognizes he's like the rest of us. He's a YouTube shit talker. We're all just shit talkers on YouTube, and the absence of stately, sound intellects in the public sphere. We don't have it in politics. We don't have any real statesmen anymore in our politics here. We don't. And in terms of like public discourse, we don't have, I mean, Cornel West was a great example, but the thing is, Cornel West, more people know who DeRay McKesson is than who know who Cornel West is at this point.
And it's, maybe it's because of YouTube and, because, Cornel West had to grind himself before knowing, like he had to go through the grind. He had to go through a lot of stuff to get to this to get to where he is.
Well, he's doing.
DeRay McKesson, he has a YouTube and he has flip and talk about these situations. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, Sure, he can talk about these issues. He can have this huge platform of many people, but the other one, there's not much weight to it. There's no meat to it, if you prefer,
It's, I mean, everything though. This is the thing: is everything we're faced with these days, in terms of politics, in terms of public intellectual discourse, all of it. It's reality TV. It's fluff. There's no depth to any of it. Everything is superficial and shallow. And you know what? Let's give DeRay some credit here. I'm gonna give offer him potential credit in that maybe even he realizes that his entire role and persona and nature is that of simply a media darling who's an easy go-to thing, and there are talking points he's expected to recite and this and that, and he's just a talking head, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's not a revolutionary. He's not an intellectual. He's not a thought leader, at least in the public persona. Perhaps in conversation, he may very well be that. But as far as his persona is, he's just an SJW. And as pejorative as it is an apt description of the kind of things that, like the SJW is the embodiment of modern leftism, and the alt-right is becoming the embodiment of modern conservatism.
Yeah.
As before, the rational, intelligent center, to whatever degree the intelligence may be, it just can't get a word in edgewise.
Yeah, and especially because of the hyper of what we have right now. And even if you have rational, I mean, the most person I think is the one, like, say, for example, the Rubin Report. I feel like he tries to bring people up here, but it's like, even then, he's in the sea of just so many people of like so much.
People forget he's a leftist.
Yeah.
He's liberal. And it's impossible to remember that because his biggest interview was probably with Milo.
Yeah,
and he's buddies with Milo. And the thing is when they do appearances together, I mean, honestly, like, it was entertaining, but there was a bit of cringe going on when I saw their talk together, because it was really just Milo running roughshod and preening like a fucking queen about, well, Dave, your liberalism's dead. You should just join us over here on the Yiannopoulos conservative side. You fucking, like, come on, Dave. Like, suck up a bit.
Yeah, I like him, but he's like a little too much of a little bit of I don't want to say use the word cuck because it's been overused.
He's a bitch. He's smart as hell, and he stands by his own convictions largely. But
he doesn't challenge anyone.
He's not fucking Gore Vidal. I'll say that.
Yeah. And that's a hard thing to do, and I try to, I understand what he's trying to do. I understand what he wants to do, a welcoming influence and such, because he came from to young turds. Oh,
yeah, I have a huge wealth of respect for him. I don't want to be misconstrued in that sense. But I mean, it's what we come back to. We don't need Dave. What we really need, we don't need Dave Rubin and Milo Yiannopoulos. We need Gore Vidal and William Buckley. And we can't have it.
The best, honestly, I wish we had a younger version of Cornel West, or, stuff like that. And it seems like there is no dialogue. Hell, what I like about him, again, I don't want to turn this to a left as Cornel West, because he was against, like, President Obama, him basically bombing, and,
he's backing Jill Stein.
Yeah.
I know Jill Stein, not like close and personally, but I know Jill Stein. And I disagree with her about a fuck ton of things. But, I respect her more than Bernie Sanders at this point, because she stands by her fucking convictions.
And that is something that I wish more people to, but, that it's like, well, you're not going to win. It's about winning instead of trying to, and I understand, moderate your opinions. Like, if certain facts come along, you're like, okay, you know what? It seems I was mistaken. I need to look something like that. But when you just go wholesale and just again go back to Hillary, I don't want to just get this thing right back. It's just it just seems like it just goes right back to just so much of this corruption, and even worse, the person who was hired, the person who was the head of DNC, who was a part of this corruption for Hillary, she left that. She got like booted out. Yeah, she's working for the Hillary campaign. I'm like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah. No, Debbie Wasserman Schultz,
Yes,
and yeah, and she's been. Shit, I remember back when when I was lured into writing fucking clickbait for Americans Against the Tea Party, and I did about 2 months of that before I got fed up and quit, and then they threatened to sue me, and I said, well, if you want to go down that road, you won't be the first, and I'm still standing, so best of luck. But yeah, I remember even then they were constantly trying to push what a fucking brilliant person Debbie Wasserman Schultz is. And the more I looked into her, because that's what I do as a journalist, I don't write things without looking into them. And I looked into it. I looked into her record, her rhetoric, and all of that shit. And yeah, it's like you're a neo-progressive DNC establishment shill. You're here to basically exploit any potential issue or question or idea, and you're not interested in actually getting to the root of it and making solutions. You're interested in using it as fodder for political ammunition. And I can't really, and that was a large portion of my decision to leave that particular publication, along with their horrible editorial staff. And the funny thing is too, I mean, part of me almost kind of hopes that they catch wind of me saying this, because within the whole thing is, there's a whole series of rocket lawyer contracts that are unenforceable online. It's like, well, I'm kind of bored and I've been depressed lately. I'd love to fight somebody that I hate, but that all being the case, yeah, I mean, Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Hillary Clinton themselves, they're embodiments of everything that's wrong with both the political left in the West and especially the United States, as well as with the Democratic Party itself.
Yeah, and it's a shame. And I really, really think that this whole thing, the political stuff. I want to see what would happen if Trump was to win. I think it would collapse. And if even Hillary wins, I think there's so much bad blood in the parties right now, it will collapse. Regardless, I think it will be something interesting.
Yeah.
Or something even crazy happens. In fact, I told my dad about this, said, what would happen if he does get into Gary Johnson gets to debate and people are like saying, you know what? I can't stand either of these people, because the unlikability of Trump and Hillary. I don't know if there's any type of presidential. I mean, I've been around for a long time, but
they're the two most disliked and distrusted candidates in the history of at least the modern history of American elections.
Yeah, and I talked to him and said maybe this could actually happen. This person comes right out of nowhere. Gary Johnson, who was a 2-time congressman, governor of New Mexico, and if he does win, I wonder what would have happened to those parties, and would that actually collapse them both, or would be like, okay, the Republicans would say, at least he's a moderate, we could work with him, and the Democrats would be like, okay, he's not Hillary or anything else. We could just say, okay, Hillary and Trump, we could just move on. We can get on to the good stuff and actually work with him.
If Gary Johnson was elected.
Yeah, if he was elected, I think that would happen.
No, it's a pure fantasy. Right? I mean, it's an absolute fantasy. But for one thing, and this is coming. This is me. I'm putting my political professional's hat on here. The problem with Gary Johnson is that he's just not he's not enjoyable or appealing. Donald Trump's candidacy and his campaign has been built purely around a cult of personality. He is, despite being a bloviating fuckwit, he's
closer to Hillary, and he knocked down 16 establishment Republicans.
Yeah, no, and not just that. I mean, he's personally, just to watch him, to listen to him, he's entertaining. He's an entertaining personality. He's charismatic, despite the fact that he is like George Bush, when he would speak, sounded like an idiot. But he sounded like an idiot who did, My dad, I remember my father, one of the best lessons I ever got from him was about the difference between being stupid and being dumb. Being dumb means that you know better and you do the wrong thing anyway. Being stupid, you just don't know any better. Bush was stupid. Trump comes across as dumb in the context of what I've just said. He's so used to being a boss in the political world. No, sorry, in the business world. That, like, I mean, in his mind, he probably thinks that, like, if he's elected, he's gonna walk in office, and his political capital is gonna carry him so far that Congress will just lay down and do whatever he wants. And this being the fact that he's completely ignoring that the Democrats despise him more than anyone, short of perhaps the establishment Republicans. And so, if let's say that the Republicans take a supermajority in the legislature, they're going to roll back executive authority as quick as they can because they don't want Trump having it. Then they're also going to block up and fuck up every one of his fucking agenda items, short of those that they can't get away with blocking. And it's going to be Republican Civil War 2.0. And it's going to be basically, I could honestly see it being a lame duck presidency for 4 years.
Oh yeah, I see that as well. And honestly, you know, we'll get right back to if he does give it the executive power of the president, it will basically be, I think it would be like, was it Andrew Jackson or some of the old president who actually was so much used his power so much that Congress had to take it away. And that's how, you know, most of the laws and the things that are happening right now are basically more the House and the Senate and so on. I think that will go right back to that.
That's not how it is now.
No,
but
I think we'll go right back to that.
I could, yeah, and that's the thing. I could definitely see that happening. Now, this is why, and it's funny because I've been getting a load of shit on Twitter. It's been pretty much declared that I'm a Trump supporter because because I oppose Clinton. And that's just fucking hilarious to me because I mean, I did a whole video where I called this election the election of political truck nuts versus corporate vagina. And that's what this is. Donald Trump is the political equivalent of truck nuts. But within that, like I can say with some degree of intellectual honesty that I think a Trump presidency would do less harm than a Clinton presidency. This isn't to say it would do no harm or that it would be good for the country or the world, but simply that Hillary Clinton is skilled enough a politician to where, you know, she knows how to hold pet projects of given legislators and heads of committees, let's say. She knows how to hold those pet projects hostage in respect to getting things done. And if she has the power of the presidency behind her in doing such, even if again, if Republicans somehow if Hillary Clinton was elected and Republicans at the same time somehow took a supermajority within the legislature, she'd still be able to get way more done than I believe Trump could.
I agree as well. And I don't think Hillary will be gloom and doom as well. I think it would just be basically...
It'll be a continuation. It'll be a continuation of what we've seen. And like actually...
mediocrity.
Well, Robin Gething, I noticed. Robin's in the chat there. And I think Robin was the first person I said it to. Was that, like, the choice between Clinton and Trump, to me, in respect to the country and the political system, is a question of, do I want to let it all burn down and then build upon the ashes a new structure, which is Trump, or do I want to just frantically run around and try and patch a cracking and failing foundation, which is Clinton? And at this point, we've seen what trying to patch foundations does. I mean, Obama was a great hope. And honestly, like, I voted for him in 2008, and then I didn't vote for him in 2012, specifically because seeing his positions and his flexibility on things. And I admire flexibility, but when, you know, like, I campaigned for him with SCIE in 2008, and when I did so, it was in support of his healthcare initiative. And as soon as I saw, especially Joe fucking Lieberman selling out the public option, because I want public health care. I want single payer health care. I don't the insurance industry, private health care. It's not working. In fact, it destroyed my fucking life.
Yeah.
But you know, when I saw this public option, the first thing they fucking sold out. First fucking thing sold right out. And then the drones, and then the extended war. And it was an extended war that was like a patchwork thing. Because if you're going to go to war with radical Islam, go to war with radical Islam. Don't just
Exactly.
don't just do the Bill Clinton thing of airstrikes and bombings and then hope that other things take the press so that you don't have to take the guff for it. I didn't vote for Obama because I can't, in good conscience, sign my name and put my name down on a document which will go into public record historically, saying that I believe that this person is fit to lead my country. And that's the same reason I won't be voting for either Hillary or Trump. It's because I can't, in good conscience, say either one of these people is fit to lead my country.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. And it's just, again, it's a really sad and just desperate affair about how we are so like depend like we have to vote for Hillary, we have to vote for Trump, we have to vote for these either people. Again, I'm going for Gary Johnson. It's an impossible thing, but it's like, his views does match a bit more mine than what Trump and or Hillary has. So it is something that, again, I honestly did wish, part of me wish that Bernie did do the impossible and win. It would have been actually something really interesting. I think it would have been something really interesting to have someone like Bernie and Trump, just two people.
That would almost be an honest election. Because I mean, the thing that you can't take away from Trump is that, like, even though so many of his supporters may in many respects be political dilettantes, right? People who are jumping in because Trump is he does genuinely respect he does it is a genuine matter of being anti-establishment. I don't think he's necessarily fucking the right man to do that, but at the same time, it is what it is. And to have two anti-establishment candidates, one from whatever the fuck kind of right-wing Trump represents versus, Sanders' social democrat positioning, that would have been an honest election. I think the most honest election that we could honestly come to in this country would be Bernie Sanders versus Ron Paul.
Oh, that would have been,
that would have been a hard choice. Like, honestly, I would have likely gone with Bernie on that one, simply because, like, I am of the more, classically liberal, semi-socialistic sort of perspective in things. I think, education and healthcare and infrastructure are all important and should be public goods and public trusts. But that being the case, like, I also have that libertarian streak in me. And Christopher Hitchens said it one time, and I think I really always appreciated it when he said that I don't think I could ever trust someone who did not have some stripe of anarchistic libertarianism in them. Not necessarily saying that they're hardcore fucking Gadsden flag waving, libertarian types, but you need anyone who's aware, anybody who's woke, right? Anybody who's paying attention should have they must have, if they're intellectually honest, a healthy distrust of authority and a healthy distrust of the state. Because if you don't, then you're fucking Orwell's nightmare.
Or you're like Turkey's president who says, "I want to run a country just like Hitler."
Yeah, it's.
I just can't believe he just said that. Like, I was like, what else did need to be said? I was like, and he's a NATO ally, and he's a part of NATO too. So
yeah, and to think that the EU was considering giving Turkey membership.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, it's it's obscenity. It's pure obscenity, and it's one of these things, and yeah, it's it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't choice, which is why I'm choosing not to even make the choice. I may go and vote. I may actually go and vote because, for one thing, and this is another thing, like, this is the extent to which I will go to the lesser of evils category. The only reason I may go and vote is because in New Hampshire's Senate race, Kelly Ayotte who is honestly one of the more moderate Republicans out there. I mean, here's the thing people need to understand is that when it comes to liberals or conservatives, Republicans, Democrats, and I hate to do this because it's actually giving some credit to this state, which I loathe beyond comprehension. But New Hampshire Republicans are largely more libertarian than Reaganite, and Kelly Ayotte is rather moderate compared to most Senate Republicans, but she's being challenged by our current governor, Maggie Hassan. And Maggie Hassan is a fucking nanny state enthusiast. The woman, here's the thing, like the House. Oh, and here's a little fun fact, because you're politically inclined. New Hampshire actually has, I believe it still has, the largest representative government in the world. We have 1.3 million residents here, right? In the whole of the little tiny fucking armpit. We have 400 House reps.
Dang.
400 House reps representing 1.3 million people. There are people literally representing cul-de-sacs, right? And but Maggie Hassan, so the House actually passed a marijuana legalization bill, because this is the live free or die state. And they passed it, and the Senate said, well, we'll give it consideration. Maggie Hassan said she will veto it under any circumstances. And so the Senate decided to just kill it, and so it went away. And then within a month of that, first we had spice overdoses, people smoking fake weed, right? And there were overdoses, and there was like 3 of them in Manchester, the biggest city in the state. And then right now, I believe we have the nation's worst heroin crisis in the country. We like the heroin use. I mean, I'm having to move back to Manchester soon, and I moved out of that city about 8 years ago, and I'm having to go back now, and it's worse than it was ever before. Fortunately, I have guns, but yeah, I mean that's and in my own industry, in beer, actually, there's a beer out there, and I've discussed this in streams, and I think I even wrote about it once, but it's called Founder's Breakfast Stout. Now I don't know if you're a beer enthusiast.
No, not really. I don't drink that much alcohol.
Okay, I drink more. I drink enough for the both of us. But there's a beer called Founder's Breakfast Stout. Now this is a double chocolate oatmeal coffee stout. So a stout, big black beer, Guinness.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Guinness is like the weakest stout on the market, in my opinion. Like a real stout, it should have the consistency of fucking motor oil. It is black as night. When you get that foam head on top, it should be like dark brown. And this one it's got coffee, chocolate, oatmeal, heavy malt. It's goddamn delicious. And for the longest time, we were not allowed to sell it here in New Hampshire in a bottle, because on the bottle there's an image of a baby eating oatmeal in a Norman Rockwell style painting, right? New Hampshire regulations stated that was encouraging youth drinking, because everybody knows, the 16 and 17-year-olds, they really want to throw down like $8 or $9 on a single 12-ounce bottle of stout. But so my boss at my beer shop actually joined with a number of other beer sellers and bar owners, and went before subcommittees and house committees to testify about a change to this law. And the House put it into a bill, passed it with flying colors. The Senate did the same thing, passed it with flying colors. It reached Hassan's desk. She used one of her 5 annual vetoes to veto this bill, because she thought it would harm the state. And she even did so knowing there was override authority. So it was a pure matter of show. So if I go to vote, it is because I feel that it is essential that Maggie Hassan be kept out of the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, she does not need to. That's someone who really does not know anything about history or anything about what's going on in the country. Meanwhile, you have Connecticut, not Connecticut, but Colorado and Seattle, who legalized
Colorado and Washington. And here's the irony too. Here's the fun thing, because in New England, you can't follow politics without following your neighbor's politics, because we're just so tiny. Right, all of our states are relatively small, with the exception of Maine, and Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine, the 3 states which border New Hampshire, are all very, very likely to legalize in the next 1 to 4 years. And New Hampshire just passed medical, but every town and backwards nanny state like bad style conservative is fighting opening any dispensaries.
Yeah, because medical marijuana is so evil. Or marijuana is so evil. It's you
yeah,
know,
blah, blah, blah. Yeah,
yeah.
it's yeah.
I'm done with that stuff.
I just can't wait though when this state, despite maintaining its prohibition, is just drowning in high quality weed that's been legally bought across any one of our borders, with the exception of Canada, which I'm not allowed in.
Oh, so you can't say what's up to shoe on head or anything.
I think I'll survive.
But honestly, then again, I think Maryland's going to probably legalize weed soon, as well as DC did. But somehow there's some chicanery. They just make it illegal again. It is a stupid thing.
Yeah.
It is. It's insane. But I'm not surprised. But here's hoping in the next couple of years or decades or whatever that we'll finally wake up. This drug prohibition, will look back on and say, what the hell we were thinking about this? That's because if it was working, I would say, okay, it works, but it doesn't work.
If you need, if you need solid evidence as to why, why this country and its politics are fucked, you've got, you've got that very issue, the very fact that like marijuana legalization is still so controversial, despite the fact that the majority of the citizens want it. It's the elites who are so out of touch with the society as a whole, who just maintain these things largely because there's commercial benefits. And this kind of feeds back into the discussion about Black Lives Matter police reform. The drug war itself was what created the ghettos we have today. The drug war and its prohibitionist stance against any intoxicating substance that's not alcohol, because alcohol is a healthy lobby. It's created so many of the problems that we're faced with today. And if we did away with it, then we would see, it wouldn't be the fucking cure-all for poverty and the like, but if we did away with it, the issues around mass incarceration, the issues around broken policing of at-risk communities and high-crime communities, they would be substantially addressed. But we don't get it, because there are... if you ever take a look at a criminal justice, either policing or corrections conference, they're trade shows. They're not conferences to discuss policy and to discuss how to address issues.
Yeah.
No, they're trade shows. They're the latest in prison technology, the latest in non-lethal, the latest in non-lethal takedown technology, the latest in firearms. They're trade shows to basically sell oppression tech, for the lack of a better term.
Yeah, well, that's something that hopefully will get fixed. Hopefully that will always get better. And before we head out and everything, because I don't want to waste more of your time, because I don't, hopefully, because you seem like, man, boy, I could keep talking to this for days and such. So, about these issues, and hopefully I'm not boring you about these whole things.
It's just good conversation.
Anyway, I always like to keep things a bit, light and such like that. You seem like someone who's played at least some games. I doubt you've ever watched any wrestling before, but what type of games are you playing right now? And what are you?
At the moment, I'm actually I've assembled a tribe in Rust. So I don't know if you play that or if anybody else plays that, but I've built a clan in Rust of actual other shitlords, such as Charming Man is part of it. Jeff Holiday has shown up. Hateful Bastards there. Then our ranks keep growing. But I'm actually, because I'm doing everything I do on a laptop, I'm actually getting ready to begin purchasing parts for a real computer, right?
I love that. Everyone says laptop. Like, it's some poor person on the laptop right now watching is probably sitting there with a tear. are
Yeah,
just
well, they
saying
know.
triggered. Like it's
Yeah, well, they know the
triggered.
feeling. They can't play real games. I mean, when I play Rust, I'm the king of lag, and I've become like the king of bants simply because it's like the only way I can actually strike it anymore. Because
Yes.
yeah, if I'm playing Rust and I come across somebody in a field, there is, unless I have like a fucking AK on them and they're naked, there is no hope for me, none. And so yeah, so I'm gonna be building up my PC. I've got Rust. I like playing. I play GTA when I can, but that also plays like shit on this laptop. Recently had somebody buy me a copy of um, what's the other survival game? The one with the dinosaurs.
The dinosaur games. I
It's the survival game with the dinosaurs. Ark. Yeah, Ark.
oh yeah, I think Sargon was talking about that
Yeah,
too.
Sargon's got his own server. I had a bunch of people like trying to like insist I get in on his server, and
Yeah, because that looks something interesting, and because then again, I just got a recent new computer, so I'm not into the PC gaming. Well, not yet. I'm still more of the console. I was born on the consoles, and I pretty much will probably did would probably my last one song would be pretty much it. I like Steam and everything else, but I'm a console dude.
yeah.
So
Well, I mean, I've got to. I mean, like it's a fun thing actually because I do. I mean, I make it. I'm not gonna say a decent living. I make some money from my YouTube channel because I maintain the Patreon, and that pays out. I mean, right now, and granted, this is with people. They set their own limits as to what they contribute. But last check, and I probably lost a Patreon recently, but that's fine. But I was at 190 a video, and the nice thing is because my videos make me money. When I construct this PC, which its primary function is going to be processing videos. Because honestly, if I try and do a 20-minute video that has more than like 2 or 3 clips in it, um, processing at a Premiere, I've had my laptop fucking crash on me because it's just too much. I can't handle it.
it
So
will just explode like my old PC, my old one, which was back in 2011, but it still had like clips and stuff I can do with my little silly show, which I talk mostly about pro wrestling and video games, but I feel like what you do and what you talk about Antify and all this stuff is more interesting and more stimulating.
I'll say honestly, man. I mean, and no disrespect to all the so many people that I've streamed with in the past, you've got a pretty solid grasp on things. I mean, you've got honestly, you seem to have a better understanding of like American political history and modern political history. A lot of
Seriously, I just pick things up, I just study them and look at these things. So
good on you, man. Good on you.
this to me, it should be maybe I'm just a little bit old school or something, because this should be common knowledge about how these things should be. It should be common knowledge. And sadly, my generation, well, let's just say things are not, I could easily get in an argument about who should be more interesting, in pro wrestling sense and all these other stuff. But just to get into the tangle of politics, I just get like oh, I didn't know that, or just like, what? Like, huh? What?
Well, oftentimes tomorrow's most intelligent man is the one who today is saying I don't know.
Yeah.
That
And
makes perfect sense. No, I mean honestly, like this has been a good stream, and I think you'd probably be I'm gonna recommend you. Actually, I'll do it right now. For one thing, actually, Robin, if he's still in the chat, he hosts the open house, and that's a good stream you could probably get into. I'll speak with Robin. I'm looking at the chat now for like the second time in this stream. Okay,
he's
like
like,
I'm busy. I'm like trying to shuffle through things and think of what I'm going to do next. But yeah, Johnny, I mean, you should definitely go into Robin's stream. Robin's got a good stream going.
well, I'll try to see what's up.
Yeah, and you can, and if you like to, you can even go up against. Oh yeah, and the pug is here too. I keep forgetting about the pug.
Mhm.
So usually just like it's the pug, but there's other names to it. But no, and if you wanted to go up against a Trumpkin, who would honestly probably who would give you like a friendly and honest discussion, from what I'm guessing on your perspective, it sounds like you're kind of a fairly liberal guy, and
Yeah.
he's a moderately conservative guy. But Edgy Sphinx is a good one to go into, and all.
I actually did a video compilation with him with his last questions with more questions with Black SJWs. I want to try to get like the next one I want to try. I did Naked Ape once. I did you. I'm gonna try to get like that guy T. It would be my well. Would I say white whale? Would that be triggering someone? Because I want to say something else.
I would hope so. No, I mean trigger away, dude. But no, I mean if you wanna, I mean like I talk with that guy. I talk with T pretty frequently, so I could definitely recommend. You wanna, I would recommend, and this is, I mean we've got fucking 6 subscribers, 6 viewers at the moment. So I'm just gonna say honestly, like for the sake of your own channel growth, I might suggest that if you can stream with him, as opposed to him streaming with you, that probably
Yeah, I always try to. Again, my channel is more. Once I said, it's more about interest. Like my next thing I'm going to do, which I'm pretty much before doing this crazy thing on the fly, was actually writing for like a My Number 9 review and such. Something silly, things that always make things. I always like to say, I could do politics and stuff, but I always like to, want to do videos, something to make people more happy and positive and such. Because politics, is, again, it seems every time I talked about it, it drains me. It drains and such, not as much as any of the things I do enjoy, because maybe politics is more, it's like, it's real life. It's all these the consequences and such. And if you say some right things and wrong things, you might alienate people you're close to, or anything else. So I might miss. Oh, you want this thing? I'm like, no, I don't want this thing and that thing. I just want things that will help move people forward and everything else. Like,
do be aware, if you do get into a stream with T, it'll end up being an argument. I mean, he's you know what he's like.
Oh yes, he is.
But you can trigger the living shit out of him by talking about roads.
I will probably do that. I mean, that's why I always, I mean, I talk to someone. You should, by the way, you should check out like Shane Killian. I usually do most of my work over there with podcasts and Bogacity and such. Really good stuff about about the news stories.
Send me a DM with the links and shit.
Oh, I will definitely because the dude is I mean, he is one of the most interesting people out there. Let's see. Yeah, he's really is probably one of the most real dudes about there. He's libertarian too, but I think he's more of a very what's the good word? I mean, he's like
reasonable guy.
Yeah, reasonable. All right, I'm linked there. But anyway, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, it's been a good time, man. I enjoyed it.
If you ever want to, talk about whatever, this video games, or if you ever have a mind to talk about BS about pro wrestling and such, I will be here too. So
it's not quite my my bag, but
if you want to make it your bag, go right ahead. I'll try to steer you in the right direction.
I'll keep that in mind.
Okay. Okay. All right. It was just great talking to you. Thanks again, people. It was a fun little chat and everything. And anyway, I'll talk. We'll talk later, and we'll have more streams with other people as well. So anyway, thank you. This is Duke CT with the Wizard of Cause, and hopefully you'll go check his channel out, because it is very enlightening and his voice is completely awesome. And go vote for him and his little evil voice thing that you're doing as well. So go and vote for him.
Made the second round. Actually, the next reading will be Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. So.
Ooh, nice, man. Seriously,
13-minute reading.
So I think you can seriously, your voice is more, not to be mean or anything else, because your voice sounds like mostly like a manipulative, like evil despot. That's
no, I mean, actually, I play villains more often than not, and they're more fun. So
yeah, they are more. But then again, I'm more of the straight-laced good guy, so I'm pretty boring.
I'll just say too, in parting here, thank you everyone for listening. Fuck you, Robin.
All right, talk to y'all later. Peace.